right, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to open up a map of the United States, and I think that's the best way for us to get started so that you can see the world the way that a remote viewer would see the world. I think that's the best way for us to do this. Does that make sense? Okay, so here's a map of the world. So we've talked a lot about trade routes. We've talked a lot about trade routes, and we've talked about the fact that there's constant competition to get trade out. And one of the things that China and Russia have been doing is opening up new trade routes, right? They've been opening up new ways to engage in trade routes. So if we come up here, we can see that what technically is called Russia, what's technically called Russia is a large swath of land, right? Russia is up here. You can see the Kara Sea, the Barents Strait, the Arctic Ocean. Greenland is over here. And what Putin is trying to do is create a lasso along the Bering Sea. You can see coming in here, he's coming in here, and he's digging in the ice. And this would mean that he would be lassoing us in. You see? That's a lasso. And this is a military tactic where you attempt to cut off large swaths. So what you can see up here is Greenland. So what we're concerned about is that he could be blocking trade in these areas. So this is the first new trade route that we are nervous about. Okay, does that make sense? You can see that lasso coming in here. And when we follow the energy of the world as remote viewers, we see that there's movement along trade routes, right? So here is the USA, and we see that trade route coming in and slicing and trying to block the US in, right? Now we come over here and we start to see Asia. So what is America doing? We placed our troops over in this area to try and protect our trade routes, right? And so what's happening? China is coming in, and it's starting to threaten. It's starting to threaten other places because of trade routes. So China comes in, and then over here, you've got Hawaii, you've got Guam, you've got all these US territories. So the competition for trade is along this line, seeing with the Bering Sea. And that is called a lasso, where they attempt to surround us and then tightening along the Bering Strait, tightening along this area so that we are trapped. Does that make sense? Can you see that? So where's Taiwan? Taiwan is over here. You see how vulnerable Taiwan is? Got to protect that route, got to prevent that lasso. So we're doing everything in our power to keep them from doing this trade route and from lassoing us in. Then you come over this side, and this is where we're seeing a lot of problems with that lasso because they're completely surrounding the US. Now you can see that Cuba is down here. He's got that. And now he's moving into these areas. And we have basically an opium war happening, which is similar to what the British did during the opium wars with China, is they begin feeding drugs to Americans. Often military age becomes the addicts. People in the military are the first to become the addicts, or people that are military age, their 20s, teens and 20s. So they're knocking out, it's a way to knock out your military. So the lasso, Russia's lasso and taking control of resources, trade, including oil, is now coming up over this way as well. So what do we got? We've got America surrounded. Can you see that? Can you see this? So when we go into remotes, When we go into remotes about Vladimir Putin, this is what we think about when we talk about what Putin wants, right? When we think about what Putin wants, he wants to control his trade routes. And so that takes us back to a conversation we gave January 15th, 2025, as we go into this energy of Vladimir Putin and China's ability to take control and compete with U.S. trade. Are we all on the same page? You got it? You're with me, right? You got this. You got this. So when I go into the energy as a remote viewer, the first thing I encountered was trade and competition for trade and to get trade out. And we Americans enjoy affordable prices. If we lose our trade routes, all of the sudden we don't care about what's going on in Libya. We don't care what's going on in Pakistan. We don't care about Taiwan. You will when it starts to cost you 10 times more for goods and services. So that is the story. And this was me in semi-trance as Vladimir Putin. And a lot of people got, I even look a little bit like Putin in the face. People got worried about me because this relationship went on for several weeks. And I started to spout pro-Soviet propaganda about how we were going to take Mongolia. And but let's take a look at what Putin wants here. Let's take a look.
That I attempted to, I did my meditation, got into a very relaxed state, and it was kind of interesting. The first thing I saw the lights of Moscow, and it was beautiful. I saw Moscow, and I saw Moscow at night, and the lights of Moscow shining on the rest of the world. And so this is the way that Putin sees Moscow. He sees Moscow as the redeemer of the world, that the lights of Moscow will shine on the world, and that the sun will never set.
Watch what nuts do to our body.
Oh, sorry. Hold on a sec. Got to pay the taxes. What can I tell you? So there's Mother Russia.
The sun will never set on Russia. This is the true destiny of Russia. The true destiny of Russia is that the sun will never set on Mother Russia. And he believes that the true church, the holy church that will govern the world, the true destiny of the church of Russia is to bring a light to the rest of the world. So the lights of Moscow will be a light to the rest of the world, bearing the torch of the true church, which is the Russian Orthodox Church, but a specific sect, an ultra-Orthodox version of the church. And Putin believes that he is the prophesied person that will save Russia and bring the light of Russia to the rest of the world. And so in his small community of believers of this extreme version of Russian Orthodoxy, he perceives of himself as the prophecy. He's the chosen one who is destined to bring the lights of Russia to the rest of the world. It's his destiny. And it is the destiny of Russia and the true church to do this. So that is the first vision. The second vision I saw was trade routes, and that is really important for people watching this channel who want to understand Putin. You have to understand trade routes and trade partners. And so I am going to be showing you photographs of maps or images of maps so that you can understand the trade routes that we're talking about. And these trade routes go back hundreds and even thousands of years. And if you're looking at Russia, Russia has two areas that they are attempting to get their trade out. One is through the Caspian Sea and the other is through the Black Sea. Now, the trade partners traditionally that Russia has had in the area is predominantly Iran. And it's been trading on the Caspian Sea with Iran for some time. This is why Russia is an ally of Iran and Syria, because of trade. Now, America our ally in the area is Saudi Arabia and Israel. So if you're looking at the map, you can see this is that no man's land is Syria. And what Putin is trying to do is he's trying to create oligarchs all over the world. He's trying to prop up governments all over the world that will allow the lights of Moscow to shine on the world 24 hours a day. Now, what has happened between the United States and Russia with the Cold War is that we are trying to block each other's trade routes, and we've been pretty good about blocking Russia's trade routes. And this is a source of incredible frustration and anger for Vladimir Putin because he just wants to get his trade out. One of the areas that we blocked, I'll give you an example of one of the areas of frustration for Putin. The Maginski Act, when we blocked trade, we all know about that. They retaliated with stopping Russian adoption, Americans adopting Russians. Everybody knows about that. But there are other things that Americans don't know about. For example, Putin was negotiating a deal with Libya to build a train system starting in Tripoli that would go into Africa. Because I got the hit, I did the remote, and then I started to Google, like, what am I seeing? So he had a relationship with Libya. It was a multi-billion-dollar contract, and he was going to be able to begin building in Tripoli, and then that was going to allow him to also open trade from Tripoli all the way into Africa. And it would have been good for Africa because Africa desperately needs infrastructure. Obama bombed Tripoli, and we took out Putin's trade person in Libya. We took out we basically destroyed the Libyan government. And this was we were heavily pressured to do that by Saudi Arabia, our ally in the area, because the Saudi Arabians have been at war, the Shia and the Sunni have been at war for, I think, since the 6th or 7th century. This is how long the Saudis, who are the keepers of Sunni Islam, and the Kabul in Mecca, they have been the keepers and the protectors of Sunni Islam. And the Shia are the protectors in Iran. The Persians are the protectors of Shia. So they have been at war for over 1,000 years. We sided, when it came to trade routes, with the Sunnis, and Russia sided with the Shia and with Syria. Again, because it was practical and they just wanted to get their trade out. So one of those trade routes goes all the way to Iran from the Caspian Sea, and from there into Afghanistan. And from Afghanistan, there's a couple ways they get into Afghanistan. From Afghanistan, they have open border with China. They also have an open border with China through Mongolia. These are ancient trade routes. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to block the trade, whether it's trade and moving into Afghanistan, parts of Mongolia. If you continue to look at the picture, you'll also see with the Chechnyan rebels, those are funded by Saudi Arabia. So he couldn't get trade out of Georgia. So what was happening was that people were ambushing his vehicles, his convoys. They were getting ambushed by Chechnyan rebels funded by the Saudi Arabians. This is why Putin hates us. So it all goes back to trade. Every time I meditate on Putin, it's about trade. So Michael Flynn, I'll do a whole remote on him. This
kind of goes into Flynn. This is his relationship with Erdogan, and this was Turkish Stream, of course. Zelensky, we now know that Zelensky and a group of people were the ones that sabotaged that Turkish Stream, which was an environmental catastrophe. Zelensky had mixed feelings about it, but that was what was going on there. And this is what the Turkish Stream looked like. And you can see Russia needs to control parts of Turkey, Bulgaria, Serbia. They need to get their trades out, parts of Greece. And so you have this war between America and Russia that is really about trade. And then here comes Trump, and I'll help you get elected, and you're going to help me with my trade route by getting Americans to back off and stop blocking my trade. And so that is where we are at. So the question then becomes, where do we go from here? You know, we know what Putin wants, right?
So terrifying about it. So I just want to briefly also say that when you do a remote and you look at cyber attacks coming in from other countries, he's gotten into our power grid. As much of a malignant narcissist as Putin is, and I think that he truly is a malignant narcissist, he likes war that doesn't kill people and destroy the planet and leave a lot of waste and destruction. The thing that he likes about these cyber wars is that he can topple countries and get what he wants in terms of trade routes, like what he did with Turkish Stream, without killing anybody. And so he finds killing people distasteful. He'd rather avoid it. It's not that he feels particularly bad about it, because he's a true believer and he truly believes that he is fulfilling the destiny of the Russian Orthodox Church. It's just that it's messy and he would rather do it this way.
So basically, from Putin's perspective, by the time you realize this is true, I will have taken control of everything.
This is the scary situation we find ourselves in right now. So we have to pray that the good people of our intelligence agencies can do what they have to do to get out of this. But it's a very scary time right now that we are living in world history, and this is the remote.
All right. So you guys want to go on the other side of this? We can have a conversation about all of that. So we're now talking about what is going on with Maduro. Maduro was basically one of the people that was put in power by, you had proxies, basically. You had these people that were placed in positions, let me see if I can find another thing here. But basically, that was what was going on. It's scary. If you're asking about whether or not we've done this before, yes, Democrats and Republicans have both engaged in military actions that have dealt with this problem. When Obama took out Libya, that we talked about Gaddafi and the trade route that they were attempting to build through a train system that Russia was going to build into Africa. We took out the Libyan government. It was not a declared war. And the president was Obama. Obama also gave the order to bomb Pakistan, which was a sovereign nation. We were not at war. We had a peaceful relationship with Pakistan when we bombed Pakistan. But we went into a secured location where we knew that Osama bin Laden was, and we took him out. So both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, engage in these kinds of activities because it really has nothing to do with being a Republican or Democrat. It has to do with the situation we find ourselves in terms of trade. What I think about Trump is that Trump is telling the truth, and you just don't talk like that. Well, now we'll have control of the trade, right? We'll have control of the oil. Well, that's true. And that would have been true if Obama had ordered the hit, and he probably would have. But what was better about this than when we took out Osama bin Laden is that we actually got the guy alive, but there was an arrest warrant that was issued out of New York. The question I'm getting now, the most common question is, was this a setup? Was this a setup? Meaning, was it a setup? Was this arranged by Putin and Trump? So, say, for example, the reason that we don't get to see the actual arrest of Maduro is because there was no major arrest of Maduro. That Maduro agreed, that Putin agreed to do it this way. And that, look, if Maduro gets shipped to Russia, how should we interpret that? Say, for example, there was a secret deal with Putin. I'm throwing out a crazy idea, and I'm not saying this is true, but let's just play with this. Let's say Trump is a stooge for Putin. Let's say it's true. And let's say he decides to arrange something with Putin. We're going to do this big dramatic arrest of Maduro, and Maduro is going to agree to it. And okay, here comes the camera, put the thing on. Okay, I can't see. I swear to God, in one of them, he was holding his cell phone and he was in the middle of talking to family. Oh, I got to put the thing back on. Okay, I'm being arrested. They're taking me now onto the plane. Something about this looked to me like it had been staged. And I'm not a conspiracy buff usually, but say that's why they don't release the actual film footage, is because the whole thing was staged and that Maduro was in on it and Putin was in on it. And then the guy goes to New York and then we agree that we're going to have great new relationship with Russia to negotiate this trade route. And in exchange, we're going to send Maduro to Russia. If that plays itself out and they never release the actual film footage of him getting on the helicopter, the actual arrest, at that point, I think people should get suspicious. Oh, it was glorious, and the violence, and the this. Well, you'll never see the film footage, but let me tell you, it was great. I'd like to see it. I think, we eventually it went through security, and Obama was able to release key parts of the takedown of Osama bin Laden, which the American people had a right to see because it was done in our name, right? So if it's a real arrest, which it most likely is, then it had nothing to do with Trump in the first place. It was, the film you just saw of me was from 2019 saying, this is the trade route problem, and this is why we have to take out Libya and why we have to say. So that was true in 2019. I don't think it matters who the president is. I don't think it matters if it's a Republican or a Democrat. I think the bottom line is that we're in a trade war and that we are going to have to do everything in our power to try and block these trade routes that we see as an existential crisis. It's like Elon Musk says, whoever wins the drone war wins the war. The drones, the ability to, even nano drones that can come in swarms and attack somebody in their office. We now have the technology, the little bees that can come in and inject you, right? Imagine swarming drones of bee-like creatures coming around and stinging and killing people, right? How would you be able to control those entering into U.S. airspace, right? So those are that is the constant battle. And I think that this love affair with Ayn Rand, who came out of Russia, and the Putin darlings love Ayn Rand, right? Anybody read Fountainhead by Ayn Rand? Atlas Shrugged, one of Elon Musk's favorite books, right? And that's because she was opposed to communism. She wanted the days of the czars to come back, like Tsar Nicholas, right? The good old days of Ivan the Terrible, right? And that's really who Putin has modeled himself after, is the good old days of the czar, the good old days of the church, when I have control over everything. And that is where we are at, folks. That is where we're at. So the other question I was asked to discuss with you all had to do with the 5 phases that are necessary to reduce the amount of casualties from this trade war, right? So we have people dying. People are dying. And one of the things that the Pentagon and other intelligence agencies look at is, how do we keep people from dying? The bottom line is that when you're engaged in a war, you want to know how do we win and not kill so many people. So after the October 7th massacre that took place in Israel, where Israel was attacked by Hamas, Hamas was funded by Iran, right? And Iran is the ally of Putin. So Putin was meeting with these people, right? And it's very likely that Putin was one of the people that helped engineer October 7th. So then the question becomes, why would Putin, who had a relatively, supposedly good relationship with Israel, well, I have so many Russians are living in Israel. Come on now. And he's been very active in turning Israel into an Ayn Rand Republican, vision. Like that's the transformation we see in Israel. A lot of Russians came in. They were very conservative. They were very opposed to these democratic socialist ideas that had been part of the founding of the state of Israel. It was extremely liberal. It was communist and democratic socialist who had escaped Tsarist Russia, and then they had moved to Palestine in order to build this communist utopia through the kibbutzim. So when the Russians showed up, that was the battle of blood, the battle for Jerusalem, right? It was this battle that was taking place between the kibbutzniks, the people like Mamdani, right? Mamdani is a kibbutznik. Mamdani is an old-fashioned, you'd never want him to say that, but Mamdani sounds like an old-fashioned Zionist, right? Because the Zionists were democratic socialists. And the degree to which Israel has lost its way from its original vision is the degree to which you see Israelis attacking Mamdani, right? Because there's this division that has happened between the democratic socialism of Golda Meir and Ben Gurion and what we see today with Netanyahu. Netanyahu, who is in the pockets of Putin. Does that make sense? So you can imagine how shocked Netanyahu was after October 7th, when October 7th was linked back to Putin, who had been meeting with Hamas, a proxy army of Iran, his ally, weeks and months prior to the attacks, which took place on his birthday. And so the other conversation became, how much was Putin involved and how much did Putin know about the impending attacks that would take place on October 7th? And the answer is that he probably knew a lot, and he was probably intimately involved in the pogrom, because that's what it was. That's what happened on October 7th. October 7th was a good old-fashioned pogrom, right? He was mad. Putin was mad, right? And what was he mad about? Why did he go along with this rogue army coming in and raping and pillaging? It's similar to what Russia did during the pogroms, when the Russian Orthodox Church, which is rabidly anti-Semitic, and the Tsar got together and would have parties. They would attack and kill Jews on Easter. They would attack and kill Jews on the Tsar's birthday. They would attack and kill Jews on Christmas, right? So the church that is his church, the Holy Church of Mother Russia, is that church. And so the mistake that Israel made was in thinking that Russia had changed. And of course, Russia had not changed. Russia was still the same Russia that it had ever been. It had not changed. It was just as anti-Semitic as it had ever been. Putin is not your friend. He is not a friend of Israel. And what we saw on October 7th was the true face of Mother Russia. Mother Russia that has always hated the Jews. Mother Russia whose church is rabidly anti-Semitic and has always called for the death of the Jews. And the reason why Putin was so angry at Israel, the reason why Putin had involved had gotten involved in all of that was because of Zelensky. You know, he had never liked Jewish people anyway. You know, he was just pretending. He was just pretending that he liked Jewish people because he wanted to do business. He wanted to topple the Israeli government, right? Because it was all about trade routes, right? So when Zelensky showed up in Israel, and when Zelensky started getting backing from the Israelis, and when the Israelis were talking about supplying him personal security, you can imagine, here's where every attack took place, you can imagine how Putin felt about that. And so he is one of the people that most likely participated in a good old-fashioned pogrom. Well, you're not going to let me have my trade route. You're siding with Zelensky. Now, Zelensky, the other thing you have to realize about Zelensky is that Zelensky used to work for, I believe it's Channel One, which is owned by Roman Aronovsky. Roman Aronovsky is a Russian Jewish Israeli oligarch who used to have a relationship with Putin, but now they're not getting along so well. And the reason they're not getting along so well is because Aronovsky is the former boss of Zelensky, who was an actor at and probably funded his ability to win the presidency in Ukraine. So at that point, Putin now has a new enemy, and that is he's going to avenge. He's going to show the Israelis how mad he is about their love affair with Zelensky. And then at that point, October 7th, we were able to see the real face of Putin. Many people couldn't understand why I kept pointing to Putin for the October 7th massacres. And it's because, and the reason why people were confused was because they couldn't understand how this person who had historically been supposedly had this great relationship with Israel, all of a sudden was being accused of being involved. And the reason why he was being accused was because of his relationship with Hamas and Iran, and because this had been going on for a really, really long time prior. You know, if you look at the history of Russia and the church that Putin is so committed to, here's the Times of Israel blog I have, same article. If you want to check it out, I'll go ahead and give this link to you guys if you want to read the article showing that Putin was probably involved with October 7th. He was angry, you know, he was angry because imagine how he felt. He put all that money into those Jews, right? You know how much he hates the Jews, right? His church hated the Jews. All you have to do is look at the history of the pogroms and the genocides that his church, his holy church, participated actively in for centuries, right? So this is why the Jewish people were attracted to communism. The Bolsheviks revolution became attractive to Jewish people because they wanted to get rid of the czar who had been pushing these pogroms. God bless the czar and keep him far from us, right? Fiddler on the Roof. So I wanted to go through all of that with you, and we have done a great job, and I'm very proud of all of us. All right, so now that you got all of that, let's go and take one more look at how this is going to go down. This is how it's going to go down. This is the letter sent to the Israeli Defense Forces on December 20th, 2023. They opened the door and said, okay, if you're an Israeli and you have something you want to say to us, we are a democracy. Tell us how you feel. The door is open. You can present yourself before the IDF. We're only 10 million people, Israelis, right? So I'm an Israeli citizen. So I thought, well, what the hell? I'll give it a shot. We need to get to ceasefire. Then after we get to ceasefire, with Hamas, we need to do an exchange of hostages and then lure Hamas to a host country. And then we need to rebuild. So those three phases were accepted by Biden. Biden was sent copies, and so was Kerry, so was the State Department, etc. So we had the first three phases down. I was looking at, when I did data on this, least amount of deaths. So I think that they were also looking at least amount of deaths because they agreed with the three phases. They rolled it around with the IDF. Other people had similar ideas. They challenged it. By May, this was December, by May it had been adopted. So I'm pretty sure a lot of us had come up with the same three phases. The fourth phase had to do with the isolation of Vladimir Putin because he was intimately involved and he was a threat, but he was also an existential threat. He had nuclear weapons. He was talking about, they were threatening to bomb Zaporizhzhia, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. It would have wiped out Russia, parts of China, and possibly taken out parts of Europe, right? So he became the number one existential threat, according to the data. And to this day, Putin remains the greatest existential threat to a nuclear war. And we are about 1 to 2 minutes from midnight. So our risk of a nuclear event has increased since October 7th, right? It's only going up. And then the fifth phase will be, we will see the dismantling of Iranian leadership. So what you should start seeing, if they're following the 5 phases, is you should start to see that Putin's proxy armies become dismantled, not just Libya, right, which Obama took care of that, but we're now starting to see other proxy armies and other puppets of Putin, or what Putin calls in the remotes, my little birds. When I went into trance as Putin, I called them my little birds. Maduro was my little bird. And I pet my bird. I feed my bird. I take care of my bird. And then he grows up. He becomes a vulture. He becomes the falcon, right? I'm like the falcon leader. I send the falcon out, right? So this is the imagery I'm using as Putin. So Maduro was my little bird and I was feeding it. I was keeping it alive. Assad, when we went into Syria, my little bird, I'm feeding it, protecting my trade routes. Gaddafi, my little bird, Gaddafi. So we begin to dismantle. Bolsonaro's gone. And so what you're seeing is this slow, steady dismantling and the destruction of the Turkish stream. Now they don't have oil in Russia. All of that is part of the dismantling of Putin. Does that make sense? And we now see the fall of Iran, which was the next phase. Phase 3 was announced this weekend at Mar-a-Lago. So they're just going to start rebuilding, isolating Hamas. Anybody that wants to be part of the rebuild that renounces Hamas can come into the safe zone, get jobs, get food, get a great life. And so what happens is, just by ignoring and isolating Hamas, they collapse. They've got a great deal. They should take a host country, because if they wind up isolated in somewhere like Gaza City, after we've given safe harbor to the civilians and children into safe zones, which is what we're going to do, then they will drop a massive bomb and kill them all, which would be about 325,000 terrorists. So it's becoming increasingly obvious to Hamas that they probably need to get on the boat and go to Algeria or somewhere else, because that sorting process is happening now. They're starting this division. And now that the safe zones are getting ready, we now have a place to take the innocent people. Hamas will not be long for this world. We will not be seeing a deal with Iran and Russia for normal relations. That was the mistake that Obama 100% takes responsibility. Did everybody read Obama's memoir after he finished his 2 terms? So he talks about that. So regrets about regrets about taking out Libya, but I don't think we could have worked with Putin. I don't know if I totally. And then his feelings about being up at night with Pakistan, right? The instability of Pakistan and Russia going back into Afghanistan with those new trade routes, right? So this is where we are at. Do I think that we are following the 5 phases that were calculated as least amount of deaths? This was also using Colossus computer, and I used a couple different Chat GPT, but I used Grok a lot. Grok is the most advanced for this kind of stuff. It's the same that 8,200 other intelligence agencies will use Grok partially. The Colossus computer. So do I think that they're following this? Yes, 100%. I think it's pretty obvious at this point. The cat's out of the bag. Now that we're seeing the fall of Iran, so the other thing you could ask yourself is, how scared is Putin? Grok